What's the minimum? What's the minimum seed in the NCAA tournament? What's the minimum ACC record? What's the minimum outcome to deem this season a success? Rob, I'll start with you first because we've been pretty opinionated about it, and I think it's a fair discussion. Granted, a lot could change between now and April or the end of March, but what's a fair, reasonable expectation and necessary to get off of this discussion about bubbles and coaching and all that kind of thing, in your opinion?
Well, I will leave fairness behind because that opens up a can of worms. What is fair to expect? I'll stick with what you just said, Tommy. What is necessary? What I think is necessary is top 15. For me to consider this season a success, they have to be a top 15 team. Not they get there for a couple of weeks, but to consistently be there, give or take a week or two. But they need to be consistently that good. They need to be no worse than a 4 seed going into the tournament. They need to beat good teams. I'm not someone who says they have to split with Duke, but they have to be at the level where they beat teams of that caliber, possibly, hopefully, including them. But they have to be able to step up and show they can get over the hump against these guys, win close games. In the tournament, I almost consider. I mean, I do consider it a second season. I don't like the idea of having a great regular season. You get upset in the tournament, and that causes the coach to get fired if everything else is going well. I've never liked that, but if it's close, of course. But I think to sort of round out the year, say we're going to combine regular season, postseason, I'm saying top 15 and Sweet 16 to sort of legitimize. I know that that's not vintage Carolina stuff. Sweet 16 is not the thing that you dream about as a Carolina fan at the start of the season. But I think that's what's necessary. Now, maybe they can do a little better, but top 15, Sweet 16 for me, irrespective of what's happening with the conference standings, because we don't necessarily know. We don't know how good the other teams will be. But from a quality point of view, that's where I am.
Yeah, I remember in 1994 when Carolina was upset by BC and Curley and them trying to kill Derek Phelps. It was horrifying that they had lost before the Sweet 16. It was just not a thing. It was, however many years straight of the Sweet 16. Jeremiah, what's necessary for this team? You cover them, you see them up close,
Yeah.
And certainly have covered the good and the bad over the last couple of years for Inside Carolina.
Mhm.
What's the necessary benchmark here for this team and for Hubert Davis?
When you consider this offseason, using a GM to kind of scour players in the portal, you got your 7-footer, you got your point guard who can shoot it. Potentially, you have your overseas edition. In my mind, you have a first round. I would maybe think a high first round level draft pick on your team. Uh, as we've mentioned, the ACC is not a gauntlet. Um, I would think to go to bed at night at the end of the season and sleep well, let's say. I would say, honestly, probably the top 4 seed in that NCAA tournament. You're obviously not wanting to sneak in there, but even if you do make it comfortably, you don't want to be a 7 seed. You don't want to be an 8 seed. You want to be probably a top 4 seed, top 3 finish in the ACC, and getting to the Sweet 16. And the win total, yeah, that can be random when it comes to who knows what the ACC tournament is, and you'll drop when you're not supposed to drop in regular season play. I mean, can you get to the 25 win mark? Just however the postseason shakes out. Like, let's say you're 25-10 or something like that. You don't love double digit losses again, but I mean, I think 25 is maybe 26 probably. Because you got to factor in last year that number could have been slightly higher if first halves were played better. Like they probably could have got 26 last year if they don't get down by 20 against some of these teams. So maybe let's say maybe 26 wins, your top 3 in the ACC, and your 4, maybe a 5, but probably a 4 seed in that NCAA tournament.
Greg Barnes, the IC historian. What is your thought here? I mean, seriously, having these discussions at the end of every year, for the fan base, it's tiring. and especially when you look at the Carolina history. And I know the landscape is much different. But if you go look at a website, I'm looking at sportsreference.com, and it has every Carolina record from, God, if I keep going, I'm going back to pre-first World War I. But it is distinctly different in the last 6 or 7 years for expectations for this program. So this year, 25-26, what you think? What's necessary?
Let's start here and work backwards. If you look at North Carolina's NCAA tournament success, as a 1 seed, they've played 78 games. As a 2 seed, they've played 32 games. And then when you go to a 3 seed, they've played 7 games. They played 6 games as a 4 seed and 6 games as a 6 seed. So just judging by those numbers, that kind of tells you where the North Carolina bar is. And I say that because I agree with a lot of what Rob said. I've never put too much stock into the NCAA tournament outside of certain situations where, Bill Self, for example, he's won some championships and gotten to some Final Fours. He's also had a number of games that he's lost he shouldn't have lost. We were spoiled by Roy Williams because Roy always seemed to at least get to the second weekend, and he always had his teams playing best. And it helps when you have one of the best teams in the country, which I think is the important thing here. When you talk about the fatigue that the North Carolina fan base has really endured since COVID, ever really since the team got the flu in the Sweet 16 game against Auburn, I guess, in 2019. We have not seen the in regular season success that was a staple. And I was just conditioned by Dean and by Roy, because Roy talked about it so much, that Dean really liked the idea of the ACC regular season championship, because you have to win a lot of games over several months to prove that you're the best. Once you get into a tournament setting and it's a single elimination, anything can happen. And we've seen that. North Carolina was an 8 seed a few years ago. They got hot and went on a run. But they were not arguably the second best team in the country throughout the year. Everybody knows that. But everybody was able to enjoy it. But it was a lot of hand-wringing throughout that season because Carolina lost a number of games by 20 points, which typically doesn't happen. And I think when you go back to the 24 season, that felt like a North Carolina year because UNC was a good team throughout the entire regular season. They were not just top 25. They were pretty much top 10 all season long. And that's what North Carolina is about. It's about turning on the TV the last weekend of December and seeing, hey, North Carolina is number 7. That's North Carolina basketball. Or being competitive late in the game or late in the season, you're going to Cameron on the last day of the regular season and playing for the ACC regular season championship and maybe the number 1 seed, both in the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament. That is kind of the high bar of North Carolina basketball. Now, for this season, is that the requirement? No, that's too much. That's where Carolina fans want to be, but you can't say it's a 1 seed or bust. That's not fair. But I do think Rob's spot on in saying, if you're kind of top 15, that gets you in that ballpark. And I've always kind of had like top 4 seed pegged. Because if you're top 4 seed, if you look at the data of the NCAA tournament, the top 4 seeds primarily win the NCAA tournament. Of course, the majority of that's the 1 seeds and then some 2 seeds, but there have been enough 4 seeds that have done it that you can be a legitimate contender as a 4 seed. And that means you had a really good year if you're that high of a seed in the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens in the NCAA tournament. So I think that's kind of the baseline is be competitive. It doesn't mean you have to win the ACC, but you need to be a contender. And you need to be around that top 10 framework all season long where people are talking about you. When highlights come on at night, you're one of the first teams they're showing. That's what I think of when I think of North Carolina basketball. And I think that's kind of the expectation for this season.